to today's broadcast of North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of NIC television students, and your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
Today we're very honored to have on our program Harvey Goldstein of Los Angeles, California. Our guest is a certified public accountant, and he recently was appointed by President Ronald Reagan to be a member of the National Productivity Advisory Committee of the United States. He also has been part of and a participant in the White House conferences on small business. He also serves on the California Small Business Development Board, and he was named Small Business Accountant Advocate of the Year by the Small Business Administration. He's, as you can see from these credentials, very successful in the world of business, and he speaks to organizations throughout the country, and he's been in Coeur d'Alene to speak to the business community and at North Idaho College. Mr. Goldstein, welcome to our program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, of course.
Very happy to have two members of the panel to question our guest today. First of all, to my immediate left is Steve Shink, who is the Dean of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College, and next to him is Marshall Mend, who is a real estate agent in Coeur d'Alene and very, very successful. And I want to take this time to thank Marshall, who's responsible for our guest being in Idaho with us today. Without him, we would not have this opportunity. Thank you very much. And I will ask Steve
I think
Shink,
you ought to thank him after the show.
instead of before.
Yeah, of course, you never know what's going to be.
I will invite Steve Shink to commence the question.
Thank you, Tony. Mr. Goldstein, we hear so much about small business being the backbone of the American economy,
yes.
how big a part it plays in employment, gross national product, and other things. What's the climate like out there today? How are small business people doing?
Well, I think as a whole, I think the climate is very, very good. Unfortunately, I think with the recent fluctuations in the stock market, some of the economic predictions may start to change that climate because they almost become self-fulfilled prophecies. The climate is great. What we have to do is stop listening to all these negative people and these doomsayers, because they may start to turn it around inadvertently. But I think the climate is great for small business. They've been producing more businesses, more employment than big business. So things are great.
I don't want to get on a negative track after your good advice, but how's the stock market problems? How will they sift down to affect small business?
I think that they will only sift down from an attitudinal aspect. I think that most small business people are probably not in the stock market. Maybe some of them have a little pension money in it and so on. And I think that it shouldn't have any impact on small business. The only thing that it might do is change some of the attitudes of the consumer, which then would have an impact on small business. But basically, if people just go about doing what they've set out to do and not have make any major changes as a result of that, I think the economy will remain strong and small business will get stronger.
The failure rate for small businesses is high.
Yes.
It's a pretty tough go for a lot of them out there. What do you attribute that to? Maybe it's a lot of things, or maybe there's something in particular.
Well, I think that, first of all, I think the statistics are not exactly fair statistics. When they talk about the failure of small business, I think they usually use tax returns to determine that. And every Schedule C where somebody may have had $300 worth of income and put it on a Schedule C, if that Schedule C disappears, it's a small business that failed. So I think part of it is the statistical aspects may not be as precise as we would like. But the primary purpose for those that do actually fail in business, I believe, is just as a result of a lack of management skills. I find that an awful lot of small business people will moan and groan about the problems that they have in running businesses, but they generally will not take any steps to educate themselves to help them in making those businesses more profitable. So I think it's the management attitude that really destroys the business.
Are there some specific skills you see lacking in the average small business person, or is it?
Oh yeah, I think the primary skill that most small business people lack is the understanding of the financial aspects of the business. One of the things that I tell people when I do my speeches is the fact that what we have to do is we have to understand that once the sale is made, everything from that point on is financial, and it's very, very incredible how we will spend a huge amount of time attempting to make the sale, but very little time in attempting to learn and understand the financial aspects of running the business, and I think that's one of the reasons that they have a problem.
Very interesting.
Marshall Mend.
Harvey, can you tell us some of the benefits to small business with the new Tax Reform Act?
there's a presumption that there's a benefit. I think that whatever benefit there is, and I think there are some benefits, believe it or not, I think that small business as a general rule did not get hurt too badly with the Tax Reform Act. However, whatever they gained in tax savings, they probably will have eaten up in the cost of administrating those tax savings, doing tax returns and the administrative costs that they require now to report more information will become significantly more expensive for small business, and any benefit they may have received tax-wise they're going to lose as a result of high administrative costs. The one area that I think has been a real problem for the capital-intensive small business is the loss of the investment tax credit. Now, most people will tell you that the investment tax credit does not induce people to invest in equipment, and my response to that is yes, that's exactly the case. I've never had anybody buy equipment purely from the standpoint of getting a tax credit, but the tax credit adds capital to the business, and anytime you have a small business and you take away capital by the loss of a benefit, I think you've really hurt that business, because small businesses are historically undercapitalized, and any vehicles and anything that takes away their capital really is a problem for them.
I want to bring something else up, Harvey, that's very important, I think, on the program. One of the things you've done while you've been in Idaho is talk a lot about your new book, and it's called Up Your Cash Flow, and I have a copy of it here with me.
Yes.
It came out in 1986, I believe, and certainly any viewer who's interested in this book can contact us and we can get them in touch with
Right.
the publisher.
Probably available in their bookstores too.
Right. In your
It's great.
I was surprised to hear you say that.
Yeah, I'm sure you are.
All authors tend to say that, but you did speak from the subject of this book to the
Yes.
students today, and I was very impressed with how you emphasized with small business or any organization, institution, that it's a people business. And I know we have limited time, but I would appreciate, and I think our viewers would appreciate that have not read your book, for you to walk us through the 6 major characteristics that you talk about for success of a business.
Sure.
And give us that summary.
Well, the first thing I do is I say that people have to attempt to control the expenses of their business, and what I tell them to do is to control the expenses by having some idea in advance of what the expenses are going to be, and then when you ultimately spend the money, you at least can see whether you're in the ballpark of what you had anticipated. And basically what I'm saying is everybody should operate a business from the framework of a budget. The second ingredient for a successful business that I've outlined in my book is to develop power and influence, to be involved in the political process, because it's the politicians that will find ways to get at our resources, because we're basically, the business community is the only community around that develops resources, and the legislators and the politicians will do what they can in order to get to those resources. And one of the things that we must be doing is being involved in the process so that we at least give the people that are going to have an impact on our lives, at least give them some notion as to what our problems are, and hopefully they will not legislate us out of business. The third area that I talk about is attitude. I believe that, and I said this earlier, the negative attitudes would be, negativism feeds upon negativism, and so consequently what I do is I try to tell people to be positive about things at all times, because if we're all positive and everybody is feeling good, then things will be great. But if we start being negative, things go in that opposite direction. Our attitudes have a strong impact on the economic forces in this country, and as long as we can remain positive, then we will continue to have good positive things going on, and those same attitudes will permeate our companies when we run them. Positive attitudes, I think, is important. The fourth area that I talk about is developing systems that tell you what's going on from a financial standpoint. I talk about getting financial data and understanding it, and I even explain how to read financial statements in layman's terms in the book. And I talk about the need for monitoring cash and managing accounts receivable, managing inventories, because those are the kinds of things that are very, very costly in running a business. The fifth thing that I talk about is planning. Everybody should do some kind of planning, and what I've done is outlined what I call the wine and cheese business plan, which is a very simple, very painless way of trying to get the entrepreneur to do some goal setting and some planning for the future. And of course, the one thing that I talk about most extensively is the need to develop people, because I believe that the people will be the most successful people. They will rise to the highest levels. They will be the ones that people will seek out to be their professional advisors, their managers, and so on. And I believe that we have to develop people and train people, because the most important asset that we will ever create in our businesses is people, a good team of people, and so on. And then the last thing I talk about is the leadership. And what I really, in effect, say is, don't worry about if you compare against all the great leaders in America. It's not important. The only thing that's important is what you do, how you operate your business. And that's what you're going to be judged on, and that's the one thing that you should be spending most of your time in planning and so giving some vision and direction for your business.
I would like to pursue it a little bit further and
Sure.
a couple of those points. I thought you made such a clear and articulate statement this morning concerning that some individuals have a small business, maybe it's the pharmacy business, and they're
Yes.
experts at that particular area.
Yes, right.
But they're not business managers.
Right.
Do they make a mistake trying to save some dollars to manage themselves when they should hire someone to assist if that's not their expertise?
No, I think that the difficulty that they have is, I think the ultimate responsibility of the success of a small business lies in the hands of the owner. And I think that what they have to do is they have to spend some time. They certainly have to hire good professional people, good lawyer, good accountant, good insurance people. But they really have to have some basic skills, and they don't. Like the pharmacist who becomes the drugstore owner, knows how to count pills, but doesn't know anything about the financial aspects of running a drugstore. The mechanic that all of a sudden owns a service center. The carpenter who becomes a contractor. They don't need to hire people. They just need to spend some time in educating themselves, and that's what they don't do. And what I've tried to do in my book is give them a good part of that education in a very simple, easy to read manner with big print, because I know we all wear bifocals when we get past 40, right?
Steve Sheen.
Up Your Cash Flow is one place for a small business person to go, that book, to go for help in running his or her business.
Yes.
Where else? How
I
else
think
could you
that
suggest
one of the
that?
things that I suggested to people, and I hear this all the time, gosh, my business, I don't know what to do and everything else. I even got it this morning when I was talking to one of the students or one of the people that was visiting. Go back to the colleges. They have good management opportunities.
We were hoping you'd say that.
Well, but I believe that. I'm not saying that because you're from the school. I'm saying that because I believe it. I found it incredible that some of the people will complain about the problems that they have, but never even attempt to educate themselves to be able to understand those problems. I think going back to the schools, I think many of these universities have extension courses, these one-day courses on how to understand business. I know I teach a course on how to fund your small business at UCLA, and those are the kinds of things. The problem is that they're so busy involved in the details, they just can't break away. But there's also evenings, and there's Saturdays, and there's all kinds of time, and people can really educate themselves if they set about to do it. And I believe that education, in my opinion, is got to be the most important issue facing our country today, and that is keeping a well-educated workforce. We need it. Absolutely.
You mentioned before that management skills are one major problem, real barrier for small business people. A lot of them never get to that point. There are a lot of people out there, and I think there's a sort of a mythology that's sprung up in this country, especially about owning your own business.
Right.
People idealize that, but they maybe overlook the fact that it's hard work, that oftentimes the rewards aren't what others think that they are.
Right.
But the big barrier, and I've had many bankers tell me this, the thing they see from their point of view is that capitalization question. Where do you bring in the accountant? Where do you bring in the other people that help you find the funds to get a business started on the kind of footing that's going to allow it financially to be successful?
Yeah, well, the most difficult problem facing small business is the ability to get funds. I mean, it's almost impossible. If you're starting, there are no funds available. Venture capitalists will not touch you. T-Bone Pickens won't make a tender offer. You've got to beg, borrow, and steal, and get everything you can, borrow on your homes, borrow on your life insurance, borrow from friends, borrow from relatives. And that's what it takes. Unfortunately, the banks will not loan you dime one unless you have dime one, and then they may loan you dime two if you're lucky. So you have to really scrimp, and where the accountant comes in is right at that very beginning. The accountant should help you lay out a plan to tell you how much money you need, how long is it going to last, and where are we going to be when it's over. Because money, you know, people get this impression because, and maybe it's a result of what's going on. Everybody's an entrepreneur. You open up the magazine, you read about Stephen Jobs, you read about all these people who've made millions and billions of dollars, and it doesn't exist for most people. Those are the absolute exception as opposed to the rule. Most of us have to work our tails off in order to be successful, and we've got to hold on to every dollar, and those accountants and those advisors will help you in the very, very beginning. And I get people that walk into my office and they tell me they're going to buy a business. I say, how much are you going to pay for it? They tell me $1 million. They say, okay, and what are we going to do to analyze the business you're going to buy? And they say, well, I don't want to spend any money to do that. You know, so people really make some absurd judgments. So we need advisors, and we got to bring them in the beginning because they'll hopefully help us out.
Marshall Meehan.
What about the young person wanting to go into business? What kind of advice would we have for him?
Well, Marshall, let me tell you this. I think there's a myth that exists, and I think you alluded to it, and that is that everybody should be in business. And I think the reality is not everybody should be in business. That's probably why we have these huge statistics about business failures. I think that anybody who is planning on ultimately going into business should go work for somebody first and find out as much as they can about being involved in business rather than walking out of school and opening up your own business. It's almost an impossibility. My view is that the young person ought to spend the first 5 to 10 years out of school learning as much as they possibly can about every phases of business to make themselves more and more valuable, and then ultimately going into business. And remember this, not everybody should be in business, even though the myth is that we all should own if we all owned our own business, who would work for us?
You've been addressing today the issue of how to prepare oneself for what one does, and you certainly hit a note that I agree with as you discuss this with the students, and that is that so many people think that if they're in accounting or if they're in engineering or some of those fields that are somewhat removed from the social sciences and English, that they do not need the skills of writing and the ability to speak. Would you address that and be helpful to some of our audience?
Well, what I told the students this morning, and I was particularly addressing the accounting students, because, you know, everybody seems to, you know, the general public thinks accountants are kind of dull and dreary human beings, and they keep sending us all their dull and dreary human beings. I think it's like the Statue of Liberty is, send us your dull and dreary human beings, we need more accountants in the world. And the point that I was making is today, everybody is involved in marketing, everybody is involved in selling, everybody is involved in expanding their businesses, everybody is involved in communicating, and I believe that the most important skills, given that you have your technical skills, the most important other skills that you must develop, everybody in every business, is the ability to communicate, because we're getting into a much more technical world, and if we can't take our technical skills and communicate to people at a level that they can understand, we're just going to be the drones of the world, and those that will be the successful ones, those that will achieve the highest level, will be the communicators of the world. I believe that strongly.
Are you also suggesting that if the accountant doesn't have that ability, that he or she may not get the vital information they need from their clients to do the proper job?
Communications is both ways. You have to listen and you have to be able to communicate. The biggest thing that I see when I deal with people in business, and one of the complaints they have, is they deal with their lawyer, they deal with their accountant, they deal with these technical people, they can't understand them. And what we have to do is we have to develop the skills of communication. Everything we do as people, in spite of the fact that we invest huge amounts of money in capital equipment and things like that, and then we spend huge amounts of money repairing the capital equipment, we should start spending huge amounts of money repairing people, and that is educating them and training them and teaching them how to communicate. It's very, very important. It's vital.
Steve Sheen.
I'd like to move to a little different area, and it's much broader in scope, perhaps a little bit unfair to be asking this of a CPA, but we'll try it anyway.
I told you I have an opinion on everything. So.
Excellent. We'll test that.
Plus he has a social science background, which qualifies.
Yes, right.
Oh, well, that's not quite as unfair. We're not going to solve, obviously, the problems of the United States economy here, but I was reading recently, and I can't remember where I picked it up, but someone alluded to a real basic sort of a poverty of the spirit in many business circles today, and they attributed that to the fact that in many cases, top corporate leaders today do not come from sales, do not come from marketing, do not come from product development, but are accountants.
Right.
And that they are, instead of creating a new product or a new service or finding a better way to deliver those products and services that we already have, money is being made by acquisitions and sales. It's an accounting process. We're not creating anything new. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think that one of the disturbing things that you see today as a result of the stock market is these companies that have a lot of cash, all of a sudden they're buying back their stock. I would like to see them putting their money into research and development. I mean, research and development will ultimately be the maker or breaker of a nation. If we do not spend enough money in research and development, developing new ways to do things, then we are going to lose whatever competitive advantage we may have. And I think that those people, those accountants, if you will, who take over these companies, they have to have vision. And they have to have balance. And I think one of the great problems with corporate America today is we have a long-term, actually we have a short-term mentality, and we just don't look beyond the current earnings because they have stockholders breathing down their necks and things like that. But we've got to have that long-term vision, otherwise we're going to lose a lot of our competitive edge and we will be a second-class economy.
Right in line with that question of long-term vision, and with something else you said about education, and one of the points you made earlier about people. It's hard to get, as you mentioned, a business person to spend a little bit of money up front to do adequate research. It's hard to get them to take time from business to get the training they need to be successful. How do you get them to invest in themselves and in their employees?
What you do is you just follow the principle of continuously banging them over the head to try to get them to do what is best for them, and those that will do it will be the ones that will be successful. Everybody, basically in the business community, there are no new ideas. What it is, it's those people that use the ideas that exist that are going to be the most successful. And a perfect example would be our accounting firm is highly successful in Los Angeles, and we do a lot of marketing. There are no new ideas in how to market an accounting firm. The difference is that 95% of the firms don't use any of the ideas. We use them all. That puts us ahead. So all the information is there. All you have to do is convince people that if you want to be on the cutting edge, if you want to be the most competitive, if you want to be the most profitable, use the ideas that are there, apply them to your daily business activities, and you shall succeed.
Marshall Mann.
In the seminar that you put on yesterday, you talked about service. You talked about Nordstrom's.
Yes.
And we see some of our merchants, not only in our area, but in all areas. You walk into a store and you'll see signs that say, no refunds, no exchanges. What does that do to a business?
Well, I believe that when it comes to businesses like Nordstrom's, for example, that sell a product, and you can buy basically their product in any store around, the difference that makes Nordstrom's as successful it is and such a pleasurable place to do your shopping is the fact that it provides service. You see, those that are in the inventory and the product selling businesses have to suddenly now realize that they have to sell service just like the service industry does. And that's what makes them so successful. You can go in there, you can get people to help you. I walk into some other department stores, major department stores, you can't find a human being. And then if you find a human being, they're stuck behind that counter because they only know how to sell those things, and they can't walk over there and sell you those things. And it's frustrating and aggravating. Nordstrom's, I know, takes back any product that you bring it back. I'm not even sure you have to buy it at Nordstrom's, and they'll happily give you a refund. So the edge is the service. And if you decide to run a small business and start to cut back on the service, you've lost it. You have no chance of survival when you're going to compete with the giants that are going to be giving service like there's no tomorrow. So we have to continue. Yes, we sell a product, but the greatest thing in the world is to get somebody that can service the customer that's buying the product. That's the real edge today, is people dealing with people.
And in other words, you're saying we're in the people business, and that's what we have to do is take
I don't
care
care
of people.
what you sell, you're in the people business. Absolutely. Because people want to deal with people that they have relationships with, that they enjoy, that they like, that they respect. and people want service. I can buy this shirt any place, but I choose to buy it at a place where I feel comfortable with the people that are servicing me, and maybe I spend $1 less or maybe I spend $1 more. It doesn't matter. What's important is that I'm feeling good about when I walk into that organization. This happens to be a Nordstrom shirt, by the way.
Harvey, we, according to the statistics, I guess, have been losing a portion of the world's market, and other countries are getting an edge on us, and that affects all jobs in this country and employment. The principles you're talking about, do you have any advice for those who are in the international market, what we should be doing that we aren't doing to reach that potential?
Well, I think that most small business people are somewhat afraid of dealing in the international market. They don't understand it, and it's a problem. One of the things that we're doing in California, and one of the things, I happen to be on the Republican National Committee Small Business Advisory Council, and one of the things that we're starting to recommend to people is we have to have a central location in their various states. Here in Idaho, you probably should have a Department of International Trade. In California, we should have a Department of International Trade, where we can take these small entrepreneurs, these small business people, and say, look, let us walk you through the process of exporting your product and dealing in the international marketplace. There's got to be one central location for information, as opposed to you've got to go to 97 different governmental agencies to figure out how to deal in Hong Kong. Have one place that can walk these people through. We are no longer the United States. We are now in a world economy. Everything that everybody does affects everybody, and we have got to recognize that we have to be as strong in that world economy as we can. And you're not far from the Pacific Rim in Idaho, and that's going to be the area of the world that will be explosive, because I will predict that one day China will become the greatest and strongest free enterprise country in the world, because they will never be able to survive unless they adopt those principles, and they will.
They've been looking at some of those, according to the reports we've been reading recently.
They're starting now.
And there's a large population from which to produce.
And they've got to produce jobs, and they've got to manufacture goods, and they've got to be able to deal with people like the United States in order to get us to use the facilities that they can create. And the only way they can do that is to provide incentive, take away some of the government bureaucracy. And once they learn that and do that, they will become a huge, huge capitalistic society.
I wish we had time to continue. The time is up. On behalf of the panel and our staff, we thank you, Harvey Goldstein, for being with us. It's been most informative, and we've enjoyed discussing all these subjects, and also your book, Up Your Cash Flow. Thank you very much.
I enjoyed it.
And I want to express my appreciation of the panel. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest has been Harvey Goldstein from Los Angeles, who is manager of a large accounting firm. Has been talking about small business and how it succeeds. I hope you've enjoyed our program. I want to invite you to be with us again next week at this same time, when we'll discuss an important subject. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at the same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by an NIC student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.